down. Well, I'd say that's worth 10 out of 10.
Welcome back to Retro Rebound. In today's video, we are talking about Star Ocean Second Story Remake. Ladies and gentlemen, this is the latest in a line of what I like to call the Retro Rebound-esque game. What does that mean, ladies and gentlemen? Take one good look at the art style, feast your eyes upon it, that HD 2D blending of 3D assets and pixel art that makes the likes of Octopath Traveler, that makes the likes of Triangle Strategy, and yes, now the likes of Star Ocean Second Story Remake, although there are some visual differences that I'm gonna point out in this video. However, ladies and gentlemen, this game is a perfect fit for the channel. Have you ever checked the banner? Yeah, it's pretty fitting. We talk about the games of today while also reflecting on the games of yore, and that's all we'll do until time immemorial. Anyway, the other reason I was really excited for Star Ocean, the Second Story Remake is out of all the JRPG series that I can think of that are major ones that exist and are popular, Star Ocean is one I have neglected for a really long time. I didn't beat a single Star Ocean game. I've only played a little bit of The Last Hope, which was on 360, and I didn't get very far at all. I think I got like 3 hours in, and this was right when I was becoming a big JRPG guru. Like, I was really starting to get into it, so I don't even remember what didn't click with me there. It's one I want to go and revisit for this channel here, but I definitely wanted to pick up Star Ocean, the Second Story Remake. It fit the channel. I was excited for it. So, did it live up to my personal hype? Well, these are review impressions. I've had the game since yesterday, thanks to a review code from Square Enix. So I'm here to tell you my thoughts about the first 10 hours or so to see if this is worth your time or not in what has been an incredible year for games where it's not even about money anymore. It's about time. Do you have the time? Do you need to make the time to play Star Ocean, the Second Story Remake? Well, ladies and gentlemen, I hope to answer some of those questions here today. If you're new here, you're into day one reviews / impressions, obviously the Retro Rebound-ass game in Star Ocean's art style. You want to see more of that or nostalgic and retrospective content, you're in the right place. Please consider subscribing. So let's start off with the name of the game, Star Ocean, the Second Story Remake. That naturally indicates that there was a story before this. This one had been remade, so fret not if you missed out on that and you want to play it. You can pick it up on modern systems. I actually just learned about this, funny enough. I'm kind of ashamed of all of that. But what you also may be wondering with that title, as you look at the game and think, you know, this actually looks pretty cool. I kind of want to pick this up. You don't have to play the first game to understand the second game, which is obviously fantastic news. So the story here is based around Claude C. Kenny. Now you can, when you start up the game, pick whatever character you want to start the game off as, whether it be Claude or it can be Reina. You can pick one of these two. You can choose the Japanese or English voiced cast, and you can be on your merry way. You can even change your name if you'd like. But you play as Claude C. Kenny, and he starts off his adventure on a derelict planet. It's very mysterious and moody. Lightning flashing everywhere as this crew is searching for something. Something is here on this planet. And as you make your way through, you find what is an alien device. Cloud, being bold and ambitious, approaches it, and he is brought somewhere in a galaxy far, far away. And he awakens in a forest. It's there he meets Reina. And from there, your adventure truly begins as Cloud is identified as this hero who dons the Sword of Light, which by the way is a laser pistol. He dons this weapon, right? And he is seen as this savior in the prophecy. So the early goings of Star Ocean Second Story Remake, you gotta remember this is an older game, right? The early goings of it are kind of familiar JRPG tropes, although I think it's the settings that help make it feel distinct. I'll get into that in a moment. But yes, it's this reluctant, unknowing hero stumbling into a whole entire different era, effectively. He's all kitted out in futuristic gear. Everyone around him is a little more tribalistic. He's like, what hero? That's clearly not me, even though you're all sitting there playing the game going, dog, you're the hero. Just accept your fate and let's all move on here, right? So it is a little bit of that familiar starting point for a JRPG, but the way the game develops plot-wise is, I think, its biggest strength. You see, Star Ocean Second Story Remake spends a lot of time on its story. Like, as someone who's talked a lot about the Trails series here, Trails has a lot of dialogue, a lot of just sitting there and listening to characters pontificate and ramble and go on. And Star Ocean genuinely reminded me a lot of that experience. Just watching characters get deep into the lore of this world, deep into your mission, why you're doing it, where you're going, who's who, lots and lots of talking, lots and lots of cutscenes. I like that stuff. I really do. I like a game that takes its narrative seriously and wants to set the tone right, especially because the early goings are pretty dialogue free that first half hour as you're really feeling out this derelict planet and what's going on here, this mysterious vibe. And then you can settle into who are these characters? Where am I? The game plays off your intrigue really, really well. You see, the setting is what separates it all though, because there are very few sci-fi focused JRPGs in the space when you really look at them all. And Star Ocean, I love the name by the way, just you think about the meaning behind it, is one of the few series to lean in that direction where many JRPGs are fantasy inspired, where Star Ocean leans into technology. Although there is a mysticism, there is a magic to this universe, literally. So there is this apparent cataclysm that's been ongoing here and this new place that Cloud's been dropped into. There's mentionings of a sorcery globe, and you see how there's these floating green stones that are changing the personalities of people who were once good and having them carry out evil biddings, such as building an altar and potentially using Reina as a sacrifice. What for, you may be wondering? And that's one of the game's primary mysteries as you go deeper and deeper. So there is a mysticism, there is a magic to it all, where it is grounded very much in being a JRPG, but it also leans into a sci-fi direction, which I thought was really cool. I find that to be the separating factor, that even though some of the early goings are familiar JRPG tropes in its storytelling roots, that its setting really helps make it feel distinct. So I don't want to go into the story too much beyond that. There are other ways to explore it, such as personal actions, which are almost flashback sequences where you get to know the character just a little bit better and see what they were up to at a previous time in the story, or treat them like social links almost in Persona, where your friendship level goes up. You get to learn more about different characters in this world. You can go off and do this on your own in the towns that you visit. I thought this was a great addition to the game, kind of this optional storytelling that you can sit through. And again, for my Trails fans out there, think of these as more bite-sized episodes, you know, the doors that you could go through in Trails in the Sky 3. I think of them a bit like that. Although again, much shorter, whereas Trails in the Sky will be like, hey, you ready to sit down and read for half an hour? Not quite the case here. What really defines Star Ocean Second Story Remake for me is the art style. I think the art style in this game is absolutely fantastic, as I'm sure none of you are surprised to hear that take. One thing that differentiates it though that you should be aware of is that Star Ocean the Second Story is a much more three-dimensional game, something akin to, I would say, triangle strategy, where you're going to be able to rotate the camera in certain instances, or the camera follows you closely as you navigate through this town. The way the camera goes wide in certain areas, there is a sense of scale and scope here that is also captured in a three-dimensional way that isn't typical for these pixel art games. The reason being is the amount of sprite sheets you have to create per character for all of the directions that they can run in and fight in makes it where it abundantly increases the art load for these titles. And so seeing the efforts they went to here, I think were fantastic. Now, where this game differentiates itself artistically compared to something like Octopath Traveler 2 are the three-dimensional objects that populate the space. So what you'll notice in something like Octopath Traveler, which we reviewed here on the channel, is you're gonna see how the textures that they use to define these objects are a lot more pixelated, whereas Star Ocean sits more in the area of realism, where you'll find a barrel, and that barrel will be like a perfectly smooth, realistic rendition of what a barrel in real life would look like. Whereas Octopath again leans more into that pixel art nature. You're gonna see more sprites used to populate, say, the foliage that you'll find in Octopath Traveler, whereas when you look at something like Star Ocean Second Story Remake, these trees are full-on 3D models. It's these little differences artistically that make Star Ocean Second Story feel the same as those titles, but they're captured completely differently. And I think for the better. There is a sense of wonder and excitement as I run around this world in the overworld compared to something like Octopath, which has a fixed camera angle. They want to have you see specific things at specific times. It's a much more directed experience is what I'd say, whereas Star Ocean is a little more free and open. And it's really cool to see this kind of, if you will, experiment of, hey, what if pixel art played more in a three-dimensional space where you could run in circles and you would actually see the sprite sheets reflect that. So that's where it visually differentiates itself, and I think it's important to call out because when you're playing it, there is that distinction of I've seen this HD 2D style before, but this feels and looks differently. It's also how it plays with lighting. Something that Octopath Traveler 2 uses a ton is like bokeh. They use a ton of saturation. I mean, they use a lot of color correcting in their scenes, whereas something like Star Ocean, I feel plays more with lighting rather than color correction after the scene has been set. So these are just little visual distinctions that I picked up on that I wanted to pass on in case you're wondering why what you're seeing feels the same but also looks a little bit different. And it ultimately makes for a game that's visually satisfying. Star Ocean is great to look at, and I think that's important because this to me is the most exciting art style in gaming right now. I love this idea of blending 2D and 3D where we're kind of looking back on where games once were while not always pushing big time into fidelity. Now, I played this game on Switch, and one thing I will note is that when particle effects kicked in, like there was a particular time that they had fireflies floating around a nighttime scene. That was a really great scene, by the way. But when I was running around, it was chugging. And that's something you just should be aware of. The game is also available on PlayStation, but Star Ocean did chug a bit on Switch. I wanted to play it there. You already know I love to play these kind of pixel art games on Switch. I feel like that's where the home is, but just be warned that there may be performance concerns when the screen gets a little too busy and the area is not properly optimized. That's enough on the visuals. Let's talk gameplay. I think if I were to put my finger on anything here as someone who is new really to Star Ocean, what I feel as that newcomer is this is Square Enix's answer to Bandai's Tales of series. It plays very similarly to the older Tales of games, which I do have more experience with. You run into enemies in the overworld, it loads you into a combat arena, it is more three-dimensional, you have other characters there with you, you can chain together combos, it counts your combos in general, you have arts that you can use. It's so similar, but that's fine with me. The last Tales of game in Tales of Arise I thought was fantastic. I've always really enjoyed the Tales of series, although this Hysteria, I don't know about that one. But nonetheless, we're talking about Star Ocean here. Combat reminds me a lot of that. You have an attack button, you have a dodge button, enemies will glow red, and when they're about to glow red, if you press B at the right time, or whatever that corresponds to on different controller schemes, you're gonna zip around the enemy and you can hit them in the back. Just like in these types of games, when you connect with an enemy in the overworld from behind, you do a back attack, and that means you get the jump on them in the opening parts of battle. One thing I want to make you aware of is if you pre-ordered the game or if you got the deluxe edition content, Square Enix gives you a sword that does a stupid amount of damage. I mean, literally ridiculous. The first weapon they give you does like 50 damage. It's the longsword. This weapon they give you does 150. It breaks the game. And I would just recommend not using it at all. You can use like the accessories. They feel more fairly balanced, but this sword they made, I was just like, are you kidding? I was like, this ruins the opening parts of the game. So I would just steer away from it and lean into the mechanics of the game, which are very sound and enjoyable. You have two arts that you can assign to your various bumpers, and so you can do an air slash and connect that to some basic attacks and whatnot. So the combo potential here is fantastic. The combat system does expand greatly over time, but also what you can do after you beat enemies is you get BP. You can go into the menu system and you can start spending this BP on various upgrades that I'm not gonna lose my mind too much over here, but don't expect anything crazy. So you'll spend your BP on like the ability to randomly get an attack boost. If you're attacking just the right area at the right time, it just might proc. Not super in love with that, so just keep that sort of stuff in mind. When it comes to Star Ocean Second Story Remake, as a comparison to the original, while I have very little knowledge of the original, I want to keep it authentic here. One thing you can do that reminded me a bit of, say, like the Final Fantasy X and X-2 HD remasters, among other HD remasters that Square Enix has done in the past, is you can do changes to the musical arrangements. You can listen to the original soundtrack. You can listen to the newly arranged one. And you can do this for voice work too, if you want to change it in that direction. This story is mostly voiced, which I thought was great. I've been playing it in Japanese. I just really liked how Cloud sounded, and I thought that would be the best way to play it. As long as I enjoy hearing from my MC, I won't lose my mind. I say that as someone who has been directly harmed by games like Forspoken, Atomic Hearts, as well as Redfall, and many other games that have made me cringe into a ball and want to die because of the main character's voice work. So I take it more seriously than ever, and this game gets it right. The English voice sounded great, but I really like how the Japanese cast is performed, so I like the intensity behind it, the seriousness behind it, so I thought it fit better with the game. So you can make these sort of changes. They're included as well in this overall remake package. And so right now, I'm hooked. Like, I really am digging where the story's going. I'm loving the gameplay. I'm loving the sound. I mean, the music is beautiful, beautiful. The first track you hear when you're roaming the sacred forest before you meet Reina, oh my goodness. It is a delight to hear this. And this is the newly arranged one. Now, I understand how that can come across because there are some people, like I think, again, back to Final Fantasy X and X-2, where you hear the newly arranged tracks, and many people believe like Square Enix botched the heck out of that newly arranged soundtrack. And so I understand and respect all of that. I'll just say that I thought the music here was a real treat, and overall, it feels like such a complete package here, and another game to add to the backlog probably. I mean, this is one of those games that if you like JRPGs, if you like this art style, you shouldn't miss it, especially because you don't got to play the first one to get into it. So it's a great time, man. Anyway, those are my thoughts on Star Ocean, the second story remake. I'm looking forward to seeing your thoughts on the game down below. Fire away, let me know how you've been enjoying it if you have been playing. Other than that, I'll catch you all in the next Retro Rebound. Peace out.